Hi, good evening, everybody. It's so nice to be here with all of you sharing this chilly space together. My name is Esther Lee. I am a proud Korean-American cisgender woman born in Brazil, and I am so grateful to be here speaking with you today on the one-year anniversary of the Atlanta spa shootings. I am 45 years old, and I moved to New York City when I was 18. My entire adult existence has been spent living in the city I call home. I love our city. I love the diversity that makes it so vibrant. I am proud to be called a New Yorker. And it's because I love New York, I felt it was very important for me to be here with you today. I am here to break the silence. I am here to tell you my story and to tell you how tired I am. Tired and angry that even after a year after the shootings, women who look like me are still getting attacked and harassed in this city we love. And when we have the courage to seek assistance from law enforcement, we are not believed. Our stories are not given the airtime they deserve, and in turn, this vicious cycle stops Asian women of all ages from seeking help. On October 5th, I was riding the A train from the West Village to where I live in Washington Heights. It was 3:30 p.m. in the middle of the afternoon. I was rushing back home so I could attend a Zoom meeting. I noticed there was a bit of space between two men, and I asked if I could sit there. One of them graciously got up and offered me his seat. I thanked him and made room next to me for another young lady to sit. Immediately after taking my seat, the man seated next to me raised his fisted hand to my face, asking for a fist bump. I ignored him and did what every New Yorker does. I continued to answer my work emails while listening to a podcast. Moments later, he tried to fist bump me again. This time, I turned to him and politely said, "Sir, I don't want to engage with you. Please don't talk to me or engage with me. I am not interested." He became irate, and I could immediately sense that I was in a dangerous situation. I got up and moved away from him. Luckily, at my workplace a few months earlier, I had received self-defense training from Prepare Inc., and by a miracle, I was able to stay calm and take command of the situation. You know, you hear about your brain's fight or flight response, and it's completely true. My frontal cortex took over, and I began to assess my situation. Please remember, I was inside a moving train between 34th and 42nd Streets. Yes, I had pepper spray in my bag, but I chose not to use it because I was worried about possibly hitting bystanders next to me. The only weapon I had was my phone. So I began to film the incident while I was against this man and the wall with nowhere to go. It was 57 seconds long. 57 seconds too long, and 57 seconds that should never have taken place. By the way, none of the bystanders who I was so worried about protecting from my possible pepper spray usage came to my assistance. In the recording, you hear the man telling me, "Who would want to touch you, you miserable piece of shit? Suck my dick, kiss my ass. You think you are all that," while I had my hand up, telling him not to come closer and bringing bystanders in to protect me by saying, "Are you watching this? Do you see what he's doing? Can you please record this on your phone?" As we approached 42nd Street, the man said, "Who would want to touch you, you fucking carrier?" and spit on me not once but twice, making sure his hatred hit my shoes, my bag, my black suit, and my pearls. Once the train reached 42nd Street, I immediately moved cars to get away from him. As the train began to move again, I just remember thinking, this is not right. I must report this. I was pure adrenaline. I was shaking. I was angry. I was not emotional, and like a laser beam, I got off at 59th Street and headed straight to the police precinct located inside that station. To this day, I don't know how I remembered that there is a police precinct at 59th Street, Columbus Circle, but that's to show you how clear-headed I was. When I got there, I began to write my statement. The lieutenant on duty was Dewan Persaud. I will never forget him. He asked me if the man called me an Asian slur. I looked at him and I said, "You mean the CHI word?" "No, I don't recall him calling me that, but he called me a carrier. You do know what that implies," referring to COVID. Lieutenant Persaud immediately brushed me off, saying that this was not a hate crime. I was told to call within a week to get my report number, and from there I could check to see the status of my case. Between October 5th, the day of the incident, until mid-October, I visited that precinct in person twice. I called them multiple times. It was not given any information other than, "We got your report." After many attempts, I called the Asian Hate Crime Task Force and discovered that my case was labeled harassment and not hate crime. Therefore, the task force could not do anything about it. I asked them what I should do, and they recommended I call back Lieutenant Persaud at Transit District 1 and ask him to amend my report. So I did. After a couple of calls with Persaud, he made it very clear to me that I was not a hate crime victim because the perp did not use the term Asian carrier to address me. On a separate call, I had a sergeant read the report to me over the phone, and to my horror, discovered that they had not even included the fact that the perp called me a carrier, even though I wrote it in my personal statement. I asked Persaud if, rather than labeling my incident a hate crime, if they would at least amend the body of my report to include the fact that I was called a carrier, and he still said no. I was flabbergasted. I had footage proving as much. I wrote it in my personal statement. I simply could not understand why Persaud would not amend my report. In all these conversations with him, I spent hours trying to explain to him that I was targeted for being an Asian woman, that if I had looked like him and sat next to this man in the train, I would not have been harassed. I pushed back hard. And in an ugly moment during one of our conversations, I told Persaud, "I know people. You don't know who you're messing with." And his response was, "Bring it." So I did. My next call was to Joanne Yu, who you just heard from, the executive director of the Asian American Federation. Through her, I was able to get a hold of someone at City Hall who put me in touch with Jessica Corey, deputy inspector of New York's hate crime unit. I called Corey, and she reviewed my case, and both her and Hannah Yu, who, by the way, works under Corey, called me back to say I did not have a case. The two of them told me, "Maybe he was just being nice to you. You know, it is odd to be fist bumped by somebody you don't know, but maybe he was just being nice and you overreacted. You know, you sat next to him. It would have been one thing if he came to you on the train, but you sat next to him because, God forbid, it's my fault for finding the only available seat on the train. Your incident meets 2 out of the 3 requirements to be deemed a hate crime, but the only thing we cannot prove without a reasonable doubt in a court of law is the man's intent. Why did he do this to you? Why would he try to fist bump you?" And I try to explain over and over again that if I had been a 6-foot man, he would not have done this to me, but it fell on deaf ears. And at one point during my conversation with Corey, she told me I should not have filmed him because I triggered him in reacting aggressively towards me. But then shortly thereafter, she said, "You know, by the way, the hate crime unit loves it when there's footage so that we know who to go after." What are you supposed to do? You can imagine how frustrated I was. Hannah Yu, who, by the way, is also Asian, told me at one point, "As a fellow Asian woman, I don't think you have a case," which was absolutely heart-crushing to hear. It was clear that my identity and my experience did not matter. And at this point, this is now October 27th, I told myself I would take this as far as I could and thought I had reached the furthest point of my journey. I was appalled that the basic definition of bias was a foreign concept to the NYPD. And after speaking to the top cops in New York City, it was clear that they were not going to help me. I thought it was over. Then in December, I received news that my case was reopened by the Civilian Review Panel, and after months of waiting, they labeled my case a hate crime. I got a call from a detective to get information about my incident on December 30th, but to date, I still don't know what's going on with my case. What's disturbing about my situation is that the higher up I went on the NYPD chain of command, the worse it got. The victim blaming, the lack of bias training, and their immediate dismissal of a situation that should have been properly investigated shook me to my core. If they were doing this to me, how many more women were being dismissed on a day-to-day basis? The stats reported on Asian hate crimes are clearly not accurate. That was when I reached out to Stefan Kim at ABC 7 News and told him my story. Thanks to his reporting, Mayor Adams heard it, and as we all know, Jessica Corey is no longer the head of New York's hate crime unit. Oh yeah, honey, I brought it. I would like to believe I'm a very strong woman, and I'm generally clear and level-headed. I would usually see stories of people talking about trauma and would think it an overreaction. But friends, trauma is real. 24 hours after my incident, I experienced my first panic attack in my apartment. I screamed like an animal and I wept. Thinking I was just tired, I went to bed early, and the next day insisted on taking the train and not letting something like this define my daily routine. While walking to work 36 hours after the incident, my legs began to shake, I got tunnel vision, and I started to hyperventilate. While stumbling down the street, I called my assistant and asked her to meet me because I needed physical help getting to my office. I sat in the middle of a sidewalk in the West Village trying to catch my breath while shaking and crying. In my Korean immigrant upbringing, we don't talk about mental health. You just deal with it. And it became clear well into January that I needed help. I was lucky to find a therapist who helped me understand that these physical manifestations I was experiencing, the hypervigilance, the overwhelming worrying, the lack of sleep, the sudden waves of sadness, the sudden bursts of tears in the shower, was due to PTSD from not just the incident, but also from the lack of support I got from the NYPD. None of this is new to any of us. How many of you today walk down the street looking over your shoulders or have your backs facing an oncoming train in case someone comes at you from behind? I am not overreacting. I consider myself incredibly lucky. Lucky the incident didn't escalate to physical harm. Lucky to have friends, colleagues, and resources. How lucky that I am able to speak English and that English is not a barrier for me. How blessed. What drove me to continue fighting all these months was not about finding the perp that spit on me and called me a carrier. It became important for me to shine a light on our system. Our local and state lawmakers and officers need to do better. Mandate DEI and bias training for all NYPD officers. Our incidents should not be immediately dismissed. Do we need to be stabbed on our way home or thrown in front of an oncoming subway train to be taken seriously? How many more of us need to be sliced with a box cutter, bashed on the head with a rock, or more recently punched over 125 times before it gets labeled a hate crime? My case was originally not labeled a hate crime over semantics. How many more cases like mine are taking place every day with the NYPD brushing it off and blaming it on the lack of resources of the current administration? Or saying, this is a mental health problem and a homelessness problem. Now, don't get me wrong, mental health and homelessness are real social issues, but it frustrates me when people try to dilute Asian hate crimes with these other issues. Stop it. Call it what it is. Do not de-emphasize the reality of Asian hate crimes by taking attention away from it with something else. Stop it. I know I was targeted because of the stereotype that Asian women are docile and submissive. That man on the train picked the wrong Asian woman. The NYPD ignored the wrong Asian woman. I speak today on behalf of women and girls who may not have the courage to speak up. Be silent no more. If you hear of an elderly neighbor who got attacked, go help them. Help them understand that reporting is not a nuisance and it won't create more problems. Go be a translator for them. At the next election, go vote for candidates that will support our Asian communities. Let's put more women who look like us in positions of leadership so we can have real change take place. And let's make sure our media outlets prioritize and amplify our stories by hiring journalists and reporters that look like us. That's my shout out to Stefan, by the way. If something like this happens to you, do not second guess yourself. It is a hate crime, and you have every right to report and to be heard. If you see someone getting attacked, I know it is scary, but don't be a bystander. There is strength in numbers, whether you are Asian or an ally. Stop and help. Call 911 if you are too afraid to help. What happens to one of us affects all of us. Be silent no more. Speak up so we can finally walk down the streets of this city we love. And let all of New York know Asian women will not be messed with, and we will bring it. Thank you for listening.